It's fantastic to be speaking to Ayọ Bámi. Ayọ Bámi, welcome.
Thank you, Yewande.
Great.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And it's also wonderful to be in the Republic of Cape Town at the Open Book Festival. I'm going to start with a very brief introduction to Ayọ Bámi. Ayọ bámi Adébáyọ is a Nigerian, and she holds a BA and an MA from the Obafemi Awolowo University in Ile-Ife. These are degrees in English literature. She also holds an MA in prose fiction from the University of East Anglia in Norwich. Ayọ Bámi's debut novel, Stay With Me, which is mostly what we're going to be talking about today, is really a story of love and the particulars of love, such as marriage, and also the presumption that marriage begets children. And so, for me anyway, it's the story of Yejide's marriage to Aki and their attempts to have a family. The novel came out this year.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been received incredibly well. It's we're going to talk in more detail about the novel itself and the language and the things I enjoyed about it. But really, it's been the reception has been fantastic. In particular, it was shortlisted for the Women Baileys, or the Baileys Women, excuse me if I'm getting the order wrong, Prize for Literature. The Women Baileys Prize for Literature.
Baileys Women's Prize.
Baileys Women's Prize for Literature, which is an amazing honor and really testament to the book and the skills of the novelist. The themes of the story include polygamy. It includes sickness, particularly sickle cell. For me, it's about tradition. It's as I said earlier, it's about the childless marriage. So before I get into speaking to Ayọ Bámi about the story, its themes and aesthetics, I thought a good way to jump in is to invite you to read some from the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yewande. I'm going to read from the beginning of the book. So, just in December 2008, I must leave this city today and come to you. My bags are packed, and the empty rooms remind me that I should have left a week ago. Musa, my driver, has slept at the security guard's post every night since last Friday, waiting for me to wake him up at dawn so we can set out on time. But my bags still sit in the living room, gathering dust. I have given most of what I acquired here, furniture, electronic devices, even house fittings, to the stylist who worked in my salon. So every night for a week now, I've tossed about on this bed, without a television to shorten my insomniac hours. There's a house waiting for me in Ife, right outside the university where you and I first met. I imagine it now. A house not unlike this one. Its many rooms designed to nurture a big family, man, wife, and many children. I was supposed to leave a day after my hairdressers were taken down. The plan was to spend a week setting up my new salon and furnishing the house. I wanted my new life in place before seeing you again. It's not that I've become attached to this place. I will not miss the few friends I made, the people who do not know the woman I was before I came here, the men who over the years I've thought they were in love with me. Once I leave, I probably won't even remember the one who asked me to be his wife. Nobody here knows I'm still married to you. I only tell them a slice of the story. I was barren, and my husband took another wife. No one has ever probed further, so have never told them about my children. I have wanted to leave since the 3 coppers in the National Youth Service Program were killed. I decided to shut down my salon and the jewelry shop before I knew what I would do next, before the invitation to your father's funeral arrived like a map to show me the way. I have memorized the 3 young men's names, and I know what each studied at the university. My Olamide would have been about their age. She too would just have been leaving university about now. When I think about them, I also think of her. Haki, I often wonder if you think about her too. Although sleep stays away, every night I shut my eyes and pieces of the life I left behind come back to me. I see the batik pillowcases in our bedroom, our neighbors and your family which, for a misguided period, I thought was also mine. I see you. Tonight, I see the bedside lamp you gave me a few weeks after we got married. I could not sleep in the dark, and you had nightmares if we left the lights on. That lamp was your solution. You bought it without telling me you'd come up with a compromise, without asking me if I wanted a lamp. And as I stroked his bronze base and admired the tinted glass panels that formed its shade, you asked me what I would take out of the building if our house was burning. I didn't think about it before saying, our baby, even though we did not have children yet. Something, you said, not someone. But you seemed a little hurt that when I thought it was someone, I did not consider rescuing you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, okay, yeah, and it's such a great piece to read, I think, because it gives listeners, anyone who hasn't read the book yet, and you ought to, a sense of all that the story is encompassing. So that piece you were reading is in the voice of Yejide,
Yes,
the wife.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And this is a story that is told over quite a bit of time. And the narration is happening sort of at the end of the events, and she sort of tells the story, and the story is told from both perspectives, Yejide's and Aki, who's the husband.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot to sort of get into, but a first question I have is, and I guess it's a common question, and I know myself as a writer that there's never just one thing that brings you to a story, and there are many, and it's over time. But could you talk a little bit about how you came to the story, even if it was layered and there were many threads? What were they?
I often talk about a moment that I had in 2008. I had written a short story with these two characters in it. And for some reason, I was not satisfied with it. It looked okay on the surface, but I felt like there was something going on in this relationship that I wasn't aware of. And to give a sense of what it was like, the story was just one scene, and they had come to the end of their marriage. And they have people moving things out of their house, and they're having what would be their final argument. So I had all the words on the page, and I kept thinking, there's something they're not talking about. Or rather, there's something they're saying. There's something they're discussing without talking about it, and I wonder what that is. So I was in my final year in the university in Ife at that time, and I decided to take a walk during the night, and I remember where I was standing, which is where they meet in the novel. And
At Oduduwa Hall.
At Oduduwa Hall.
Yes.
And I was standing there, and I just knew, and it's like, oh my God, this is it. They can't talk about this because there are people in the room. And then the more I thought about it myself, I said, well, actually, that's not the problem. It's not because of the people. They'll tell themselves that they're not having this conversation because there are other people there. But they've had their whole marriage to talk about this. Why haven't they? Yes, they haven't. So that was sort of the moment when I knew that, oh, this is going to be a novel. And it took another 2 years before I actually sat down to start writing it. And I mean, there were, like you said, there are always all sorts of threads that come together to make it. And one of the things there's the thread of sickle cell in the book also. Yes. And also about that time, I'd lost a friend to sickle cell. And I ran into her mother at an event, and we were sitting at the same table. And I think I was busy with my phone or something. And there was a moment when I looked up, and I just saw her face. And this was someone I'd known since I was very young. And there was just something so arresting about the expression on her face. It was sad. It was sad, but there was such an intensity to it that I felt a physical chill, and it made me really imagine what it must be like for her to watch me go on with my own life. And I thought about it vaguely, but I'd never really thought about how, and I think that shows up in the excerpt,
Yes.
that all these years later, she's still thinking about, this is where my daughter would
Would
be
be
now.
yes.
And how that kind of loss is something you carry with you for
Yeah.
the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And there's this thing about, and my father always says it, there's also just this thing about how against nature it feels. Death is natural, but it's still so against nature for a parent to bury their child.
Yes, and I think that given, with the particular Yoruba cultural context,
Yeah.
it's the worst thing that could happen
It
to
is.
you.
It is, yeah.
It's just the worst thing. And if you look at the ways we deal with it, it's this interesting line between denial and trying to help the person to cope with this tragedy. And there was someone else also who we lost to sickle cell, and some of us who were his friends had gone to the house. We'd heard about it and we just went to the house. And we met older people at the door, and they said, no, you can't. And they were so upset with us, like, why are you here?
Yeah.
You can't be here.
Yeah.
His mother can't see you.
Yeah.
And so we sat outside until maybe about midnight, and
Yeah.
then we went home.
It's an abhorrence.
Yes.
So you can't attend to it. You almost can't grieve or mourn. You
Yes.
can't, there are no rituals. It's all the things.
You can't attend a funeral. It's the worst thing that could happen to you in that cultural context. And how do you cope with that?
I think what's interesting about the story is it's complex. So you have a story that is both about having no children and about having children that are sort of because of a condition almost predestined to suffer and at the very worst die. It's quite fatalistic because it's either like you just don't have it or and then there's all the pressure that you must, and then when you do, all the tragedy that brings. Is that a deliberate sort of, are you saying anything? Is there some secret message you're trying to tell us? Or sort of, are you, because you write about the childless marriage and this pressure that the marriage isn't a marriage without children, and I definitely don't think that's a truism, but there's so much pressure about that. So is it almost to say, well, you who wanted the child, look now? Is there some element of, do you see now?
I think, it's not, what I think is that children are not the end-all, be-all of life, and I think it's problematic when you hold them up as the end-all, be-all of life for people, and even for women in particular. Because even if the children don't die, it doesn't that mean that you somehow have it's a great thing to have children, and I'm not putting that down, but it doesn't mean that you've found the key to happiness or to eternal joy or something like that. So that was definitely something I wanted to look at. Well, it's good to have them, but if you don't have them, it's not the end of the world. Having them, it's not always necessarily better than not.
Yes. Yeah. What I always say is, because it's sort of, there's this sense like, oh, children are joyous or children are golden. Children are those things, but children are also expensive and they're a pain in the and they're like human beings. They're a range of things. They're not only one thing, which is wonderful and yay, it's a source of joy, but also a pain.
Yes. What I find interesting is that I feel that most people don't have that conversation with you until after you then have children, and they're like, "Well, yes."
They say, "Drink the Kool-Aid first, then we'll talk."
So it makes me think of, and sometimes even with marriage and all these things, it makes me think of this Yoruba expression, which I don't know how to translate. Ajegbodo Nwanikora, like. You're in there, it's hard, but you're going to only talk about it as if it's perfect until I join you, and then you're like, oh, welcome. But it's interesting that it's all joy and it's all fantastic, and with the Instagram and social media age, you see all these cute children.
And you don't see pictures of the tantrums.
You do.
But anyway, I wanted to talk a bit about like just the aesthetics of the novel. I remember I had the opportunity to be on a panel with you, and Molara Wood was chairing that panel. That was in Nigeria, in Lagos. And she in particular was talking about, and then I think you agreed with her, she was talking about the way in which a lot of the novel is directly translated from Yoruba. And there's rhythm and there's a way that the words line up together. And so could you talk just a bit about how you approached the language of the novel? And I mean, there are times when obviously Yejide and Akin are speaking to each other in Yoruba, or they're with his family and they're speaking in Yoruba, and you know, how did you navigate this thing of language? Because it's something that I find very interesting.
So it was one of the things I sort of had to figure out pretty early in the book, that where is this happening, and happening in the southwest, and a relatively small city, not as cosmopolitan as Lagos. So the language that people speak is Yoruba, and it's not even just about the language in terms of what their day-to-day speech is. What I'm more interested in is what is the metaphor of their life. You know, in what terms do they interpret their lives?
And do you think that it'll be singular?
No,
Okay.
of course not.
Yeah.
It wouldn't
But
be.
you're saying that you're trying to get to sort of like an essence of something.
Yes. You know, I don't think it's definitely not singular, but in what terms do they conceive of themselves? What are the metaphors they will use? What would they compare themselves to? And I felt that there would be some of them that were so essential that would be difficult to translate into another language. And then what I felt I needed to do was stay as close to it as possible, not just in terms of the semantics, but also the syntax, if I could somehow accomplish that. So that was very important to me, particularly for the mother-in-law, who doesn't speak English at all, actually. And so what kind of imagery would she draw on? What is our own pool that she reaches for when she wants to express herself, that she uses to interact with the world? And I think one of the things I was worried about was how much of it would translate at a point. But you know, we're having this conversation with the food yesterday, where we're talking about that scene where the in-laws come and she offers them pounded yam at first and then changes it to beans pottage. I'm not sure that kind of specific detail would translate very much to someone who doesn't come from, say, Nigeria, understand the food and how she's changed the dynamics of their relationship, and everybody in the room sort of understands that. I'm not sure how much that would translate, but I feel that, well, when you know it's food, so you can really move on, and the sort of the events have sort of shown that things have changed, you know, and then
you can read it.
So
was it then for you? Did it become about, well, I'm going to trust that?
Yes.
And not and also this thing, and I think many writers say it, Paul Beatty was saying it recently, just that people are intelligent, like readers are intelligent, really, and that's who you're writing to.
Yes. One, readers are intelligent. I'm going to trust that. And that there's I think any good work of fiction will have several layers, you know, and that perhaps not every reader will be able to access every single layer. And then and then maybe you'll attend a panel one day and you will talk about it, and then you'll be like, oh, okay, you know.
Is that what that was?
So I can live with that.
I'm really interested in, and I'll say partly why. I mean, I've recently started writing something that has a lot more of it in Nigeria, and I've wondered whether I have to sort of run my mind through a washing machine cycle. Like I could, no, because I worry about what I'm bringing, because that's, in a sense, when you say you wanted to get a sense of what are the metaphors of their lives inherent in the languages they speak as first languages, then I'm also having to look at how I have characters talk and whether they would really talk that way. And I've lived out of the country for a long time, and English is in fact my first language, not Yoruba. And so then I keep thinking, okay, who do I go back and read? You know, then I go and read. Do I need to go and read Shoinka? And do I go and reread Achebe? And did you? I mean, now your grasp of Yoruba is as it should be, you know, which is better than mine, basically. So I suppose I'm just asking, what in this search for the metaphors and all of that, was there some labor to it, or were you always clear about what it ought to sound like? Were you worried? Did you have concerns? Where did you go to find it?
Oh, yes, I did. I had a lot of concerns because I knew that Nigerians would be the first people to sort of say, yes,
say, what is this?
We love to do that. I love you, Nigerians, if you're listening. Take me back when I get to Lagos, please. But I'm quite aware of that. So I was, and I do also know that sometimes I feel annoyed when I read some things. And you know.
And that annoyance, is it a feeling that, because I think we can also critique that, because I think what is essential, what is authentic, what is the authentic, you know, how would the authentic Nigerian
I mean,
sound?
I'm not.
Are we copying something? And this also the sort of, what's the word now? The fever around, oh, it's colonial or it's westernized.
No,
I mean,
please.
I did have a friend say to me, I don't know if I should say, I hope she doesn't know I'm talking about her. But I had a friend say, oh, you know, but Yewande, how did she put it now? I don't want to, but she sort of said, well, you're writing in a way that isn't, essentially she was saying it's not African.
I don't know what you mean by that.
It's problematic, very problematic. But the point is, people have that way of looking. So now when I'm writing, I'm like, so you know, what is it that would make it African then? You know, and I think this is an interesting discussion because there's this idea, well, that's African.
No, I don't think
and this is.
I think that there's no one African experience. Yeah. There's no one way to write. Yeah. An African novel.
Why would we ever want to?
Why would there be one way to write?
It's a noose. That's to put a noose around your neck as a writer, I think.
I mean, I'm working on something that's very different from this now, and I mean, I keep thinking about it. I'm not sure that I want to use the same language or even do what I did, which Stay With Me. Yeah. So it
makes sense to me because each project
story has its own way. Yeah. You know, you have to find what will work for each story. Yeah. So I don't think that there's any authentically African way to write about something. So to go back to the question and then come back to this. My struggle, I think, was with making sure then that this wasn't performative.
Yes.
You know.
Because then it's like, who are you performing for?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And making sure that, I think for me, it was really about the characters and understanding the characters and having a language that reflected who they were. Yeah. And once I got that, I felt like I had the language for this book. Mm. And in terms of who did I go back to read, I read Death and the King's Osman very often. Yeah. It's so
one of my favorites.
Good, you know. And that's one that I go back to read quite a number of times.
Why in particular? I mean, could you just say a bit about why that one?
Because it's very much, and I think that it's very much in English. But it's also, I mean, the first time I read it, it seemed like magic to me. Honestly. Yeah. And I think that you might not get that sense unless you speak Yoruba very well. And you see the things that you thought could not be translated. Yeah.
And they are.
And there it is. And you're like, oh my God, how did he do this? You know? Yeah. And I think I just read it, not because I thought I could write like that, but because just to remind myself that it was possible.
Yeah. And it's instructive to
read
that kind of work.
Yes. And it didn't seem that it wasn't drawing attention to itself, you know. And I felt that at a point, I mean, there were parts of Stay With Me where I wanted to do that, where I didn't want someone who couldn't speak Yoruba to notice that this was what was going on,
yeah.
and for it to just seem like this was just the natural course of things. Because then I did think, because I studied MA literature, think about, is it performative, these questions that are not necessarily helpful when you're writing,
they take you out of something. Yeah.
So that's one thing that I did read. And I read Niyo Shundari too. His poetry does that.
Yes.
And I read in Yoruba. So sometimes I go back and read stories. Sometimes even just the Ijapa stories. Just to get myself into the language in a way that is written,
Do you see a time when do you write in Yoruba? Actually, let me not assume that
I
you don't.
haven't.
Yeah. Oh, you haven't. Do you see a time when you would? Do you want to? Is that something
I aspire
to?
Yeah. I aspire to. I think I have a decent grasp. More than decent, actually, grasp of the language. But I've never worked with it as a writer. Yeah. And working with language as a writer is a different thing. Yeah. I think.
I know what you mean. Do you it was interesting for me on a panel the other day. Sorry, because we're at this festival, so obviously there are all these writers, and in particular there's Paul Beatty, who won the Man Booker this year for the book The Sellout. But he was talking about how he wrote he wrote to his best friends. When he was writing one of his books, it was like he was writing to them. Or at another launch, I heard him talking about writing to his wife, and do you have a sense of writing for someone? For some people, it's a much bigger group, like they're writing to a certain demographic, or they're writing, do you have that sense of who you're writing to when you work? And I guess it could even change from book to book or story to story.
Honestly, I don't. And that's just honest. Because I feel that when I'm working on a first draft, I just go through it. And
so when you're working on a first draft, you're not thinking of who's reading it, even if are you writing for yourself at some or not even? It's just
yes. I'm just getting the words out. Yeah. I just want to get to the end. That's the first draft. Yeah. When it's the second one, usually, I think or the subsequent drafts, I'm writing for myself. Yeah. I don't think about it that way. But the things that I obsess about are the paragraph and the sentence. And, that's... I'm not sure that I have room in my mind at that point to think about...
readers.
I'm sorry, but I just don't, Yeah. It's just too intense for me. Yeah. It's too overwhelming already. Yeah. I can't bring that in. Yeah. Now that I have gotten published... which I am very excited about. Yeah. I think that when I was editing, I had to think about that because my editors then had to say, you need to think about what the reader would, how the reader would make these connections. Yeah. So I think it's that final point. Yeah. And at that point, as far as I'm concerned, the book is pretty much done. Yeah. I can only make minor changes without feeling like
changing the whole thing.
Without feeling like I've changed the whole thing. Yeah. So if I don't know, I just maybe it will happen eventually.
Or maybe it doesn't have to. Because I don't think obviously there's no rule, and maybe that's not important. For your project, whatever that is. That's not what's important, and which I think would be fine.
I don't know. I feel like the way I think about it is that, and it's a bit of a God complex, I know, but it's that I'm creating this world, and I need it to make sense to me, and I need it to exist in a way that's real to me. And once I do that, once I become convinced
that it exists,
then I'm fine.
Yeah. Are you comfortable talking about what you're working on, or are you one of those writers that doesn't like talking about what they're working on?
Well, I'm working on a book.
As opposed to a song.
Yes, as opposed to as opposed to a sculpture. I'm working on a book. It's a novel. Mm.
Is that as far as you let us in? Or
Well, there are people
anymore?
in it.
Oh, yeah. So relieved.
It's got people. It's not Animal Farm.
Okay,
so,
okay. Is it set in Nigeria?
Yes, it is.
Play 20 questions.
Ah,
you
yes.
could do, vegetable, mineral.
Yeah, that would be fun. Yes, it's set in Nigeria.
But so what I'm interested in is, in terms of what you're working on, is two things. One, still staying with the thing itself, if you're comfortable. I mean, are there any? Because I know for myself, there's always an obsession or a preoccupation, and I always talk about it that way because I can't tell you what it's about, but I can tell you what I'm obsessed with.
Yes.
I mean, is there something with the work that there's an obsession you have?
Yes,
and could you tell us what that is or some sense of it?
Right now, I'm in a point where, it's got multiple narrators, and I'm asking myself, who gets to tell a story and why? That's my question. And
That's interesting.
And that's because I one of the central events, I don't want the person it happens to tell the story.
Yeah, that's so
and I'm
interesting.
asking myself, why don't I want to do this? And one of the reasons is probably because I don't want, it's a painful experience. I don't want to experience that directly, maybe. I mean, because writing Yejide was harrowing, and I think it's perhaps I just don't want to go to that kind of dark place personally, and I want to look at it from the outside. Yeah. But the other thing also is perhaps because I'm a bit upset with the character, and why would you let this? Why? What's your problem?
Yeah.
So I
you
need
don't
to
want to get intimate, but maybe that's also. I mean, I think what you're saying is interesting. This idea of a story being told at the thing versus from the center or something.
So
as a device.
I think the question I'm asking myself is this a story somebody else is allowed to tell? Particularly when so many people have voices in this novel. Why am I silencing this person?
Yeah. What are you? So the other question I had, I guess, with what you're working on is also. Yeah, I mean, you've written the book and it's been welcomed into the world. What's that like? I mean, do you spend a lot of time thinking about that? I mean, I know, do you feel like I often think like it's important to protect oneself and protect one's work, and often when particularly it's a strange sort of double-edged thing. When a work does really well, I think it's great to enjoy that, but then sometimes you ought to sort of protect. I mean, do you feel protective about your own work and what you're trying to do, and not sort of getting too distracted by the reception?
Yes, I definitely feel that way, and
how does that play out? I mean, how do you?
It plays out in that I've not. I wouldn't say I've quite enjoyed the reception.
Oh, really?
As good as it has been, I've not quite allowed myself to
Is that a superstitious thing?
Maybe I'm just like, too much of a Yoruba person.
I mustn't enjoy too much because
so there might be a bit of that there. But I also
that's so interesting.
So it's. I mean, I can't complain that my diamond shoes pinch.
Yes, exactly. Or your wallet is breaking because the
notes
are
too much
many.
money.
Yeah.
So what I feel, and I think it's instinctive, is that I love the people who read the book, and they've been so generous with their praise and all of that, but I don't think about it. And I used to be much more active on Twitter than I am now, and it's honestly one of the reasons. Because every time I log in, there's like a lot of people, and sometimes I just delete the app and go and do some work and come back and then say, oh, thank you. But I always feel that it's not a judgment about who I am now. It's not a judgment about what I wrote this morning, which is what really matters. It's a judgment about something I did before. Well, I did do it, but what am I doing now?
Yeah. And it's almost sort of a kind of mental medicine to keep your head.
Yes.
Because you got to keep your head, right?
I think it's important because I think it's important.
Yeah.
Because I feel that it's the first book. It's just one book.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, no, I'm not joining you in diminishing the book. No.
No.
I'm not saying yes to that. But I mean, I hear, for me, it's like managing your head to keep working.
Yes.
And Chibundu were talking about a body of work.
The body of work.
But I mean, I do want to, and we're going to just end off, but I think it would be great if you found a way to luxuriate.
No,
because I think that's equally important.
I have a plan.
Okay, fine.
When my third book is published, I will collect all these wonderful reviews.
When is that third book? I mean today, like when we're done, find a way to do a jig in the stairwell or.
Okay.
And I mean, I do that as well. It's like because I do think, and I know this is going to sound a little bit, but it's this thing of. These are good things.
I think I did do it. I think I did it when the book has just come out. I think I did it in March.
Yeah. Well, now
and
we're
then
in
I'm
September.
like, okay, now you need to
September
stop
again,
and we'll go back to work.
Okay.
You know.
Okay. Anyway, I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you for talking to me
you,
and talking to us, and thank you for your book. And just, I really wish you everything of the best with your work.
Thank you.
And yeah,
and you too.
Thank you.